You know, you guys could slide down this way. You could slide down this
No,
way.
I'm perfect.
And he says, no, let's just
I'm
stay
perfect
here.
right here. I can hear you. I can
You know,
see
I
that.
showered this morning. I put deodorant on,
So
I
did I.
brushed my teeth.
Maybe we would know it by nobody sitting by you.
We just want Ryan to feel like he's represented.
Ryan is calling in, so.
No, it's just that this chair seems high.
Ready, huh?
Yep. Otherwise, I feel like.
Welcome, everyone, to North Ogden City Council. It's a pleasure to welcome you this evening. We'll begin our meeting with an invocation and pledge of allegiance by Councilman Severing.
Heavenly Father, as we meet before Thee this night, we collectively give to Thee our great thanks for the abundance that we enjoy and for the incredible, beautiful city that we live in and for incredible citizens that contribute in making this a very desirable place to live. Tonight, as we've assembled, we want to do Thy will and we want to make decisions that would best bless the citizens. We pray for that inspiration, and we likewise pray for a spirit of civility and understanding. Grateful for the citizens and especially grateful for those who have made the effort to be here tonight, and pray for Thy blessings upon them. Give thanks again and pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. If you'll stand with me and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the discussion or action to consider November 27th City Council meeting minutes. Any discussion, corrections?
I move that we approve the November 27th City Council meeting minutes.
It's been moved by Councilman Turner to approve the minutes, and second by Councilman Severing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It's a pleasure this evening to welcome Jenny Taylor with us this evening. We're grateful for your visit this evening and to receive the honors that are applicable. Over to Dennis Randall and David Harmon for the presentation of the Freedom Foundation of Valley Forge, Utah chapter.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the only city council other than my own that I've ever addressed, and most of the time I was on the other side of the dais as mayor years and years ago, back when I had hair.
You want to come back?
No. It's a privilege to be here. Before we make our presentation, I'd like to take just a second and explain to you and to the members of the audience exactly who we are. Just as President Truman was leaving office, he and some other people recognized the need they felt to increase the feeling of patriotism in the youth of the United States. To accomplish that, they bought several acres of land adjacent to the Valley Forge encampment site where Washington took the troops. From that day to this, local chapters around the country send teenagers back in the spring where they stay on that campus for 2 or 3 days and learn about the Constitution and leadership skills, tour Philadelphia. And that mission that former President Truman set up, we're still honoring. We will send 60 students back this year in the spring and have sent 60 plus for the last several years. The other thing that we do is we felt a need to increase education quality. So we send teachers back in the summer to that campus and to other sites to learn about history. But the third mission that we have is why we're here tonight, and that is to recognize acts of selfless service that particularly perpetuate the concept of country first and community first, and commitment to the ideals of the founding fathers and service. And it's in that spirit here that we have come here to your city to recognize the service of your former mayor, Brent Taylor. His sacrifice is the epitome of what we seek to represent and honor. And with that in mind, we would like to present to Mrs. Taylor this plaque if I can get it picked up. As you can see, it's a picture of what we call our George Washington Medal. We're presenting, so let me read it to you. The Utah chapter of the Freedoms Foundation at Valley Forge presents Brent Taylor the We Believe in Heroes Award for his selfless service to nation and community. We also have this piece of artwork that we would like to give to Mrs. Taylor in recognition for his service and for hers. So Mrs. Taylor, thank you. And while you're here, I would like to issue a personal thank you, if I can go through it. I served as mayor for 4 years, and I learned that when you are in public service, you're not in service alone. Your spouse and your family serve with you. And all of the bumps and all of the criticisms and the compliments come to the family as well as to the public servant. And I learned a long time ago that my service was family service, not just mine. And then I learned another lesson. When my sweetheart, the former Sergeant Randall, was deployed, and I had to watch her get on the bus and leave with 5 children standing there, and I learned that her service was also mine, and that when she was in service to her country, so was I. So Mrs. Taylor, I salute you as a citizen of this country, and personally, I thank you for what you have done as well as what your husband has done. God bless you, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Mr. Harmer? Oh, you certainly can. And my wife has the hangers for that right after. Mr. Harmer?
Thank you, Dennis. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is David Harmer. It is my privilege to serve as president of Freedom's Foundation at Valley Forge. As Mr. Randall mentioned, Freedom's Foundation was established in 1949 to cultivate a commitment to the ideals of the American founding, particularly in the rising generation. And to that end, throughout the school year, we bring from around the country high school juniors to our beautiful campus in historic Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, for multi-day immersive programs in the history and ideals of the American founding and their continuing relevance to the challenges we face today. We also honor acts of civic virtue, and the greatest, of course, is to lay down one's own life in defense of the life and liberty of another. When we learned that the Utah chapter would be honoring Major Taylor for his service and recognizing his family for the costly sacrifice they laid on the altar of freedom, we asked if we could join on behalf of the national headquarters of Freedom's Foundation to do a little something. We're mindful of the fact that the sacrifice that has occurred is not that of Major Taylor alone, nor of his wife, but of his children as well. And so tonight I've brought certificates for Megan, Lincoln, Alex, Jacob, Ellie, Jonathan, and Caroline Taylor, entitling each of them to a full scholarship to the Spirit of America Youth Leadership Program. When each of the Taylor children is a junior in high school, they will come to Valley Forge, all expenses paid, as our guests, and we'll invite them not only to participate with high school students from around the country in the Spirit of America Youth Leadership Program, but to take a few moments, if they're willing, to tell their peers from around the country about the life and mission and meaning of their father. In this manner, we hope that his sacrifice and theirs will be memorialized for generations to come. Mrs. Taylor.
I think that deserves an applause.
thank you for your presentation. They're such a wonderful family, and we appreciate the honor that has been given them this evening, most deserving. We love them dearly and appreciate their dedicated sacrifice on behalf of God, country, and family. And I'll never forget those 3 objectives. So thank you for coming this evening and presenting an honor that was most deserving. We will proceed to the next item. Don't go yet. The next item is the swearing in of a new police officer by our city recorder, Annette Spinlove. We have a new police officer who's just joined our force here in North Ogden. Her name is Tracy Priest, and we're honored and grateful that she has accepted the employment here in North Ogden and is one of our great officers. Annette.
Right over here, and raise your right hand. And just repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
the
Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
I think the council will all want to shake your hand.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Tracy.
Congratulations and welcome.
Chief, don't mess her up.
I tried to get a get out of jail card from her, but she wouldn't issue that to me this evening. So, certainly glad that your family could join us.
Me too.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Welcome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, Jenny, would you like to come up here? It's always nice to stand by somebody taller than I am. I look up here all the time anyway. I have here a memo from the 34th Expeditionary Special Operations Squadron of Afghanistan. And the memo reads, the loss of Major Brett Taylor was felt around the world. We were only fortunate enough to know him for a brief period during our most recent deployment. He left a lasting impression on us. He was a man of service that truly cared about his work and the people around him. We are deeply sorrowful for your loss. Enclosed are 2 flags flown aboard our U-28A aircraft during combat missions over Afghanistan in honor of Major Taylor. We'd like to give one of these flags to the family of Major Taylor and one to the city of North Ogden as a reminder of the impacts he's had around the world and the happiness he brought to those around him. His sacrifice will never be forgotten. My honor to present that flag to you. And we have one for North Ogden as well. If you need the staff to come over and put up all those flags, let me know. Sure. Grateful you did. Thank you.
Not sure which direction to face in here, so my heart is incredibly full. I don't quite know what to say, so I'll stammer for a minute and see if I can convey a few of the feelings that I have right now. One is a thank you to the foundation that has presented this great honor upon our family. I have said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, that long before I ever even knew or loved Brent Taylor, I knew I love America. Before our children were born, I was a teacher of history and government classes, and I can think of no greater opportunity than to have my children visit Valley Forge in such an immersive program. So as a teacher and as a mother, thank you. One of the last conversations Brent and I had while he was deployed was discussing places we hope to take our children. I had just returned from a family vacation to a cruise in California with lots of cousins, and though it was fun, I felt there was something lacking, and Brent and I agreed that we wanted to have meaningful vacation opportunities with our family, including places like Valley Forge. So this truly is just a wonderful gift, and something that through the next 16 years, as our children reach the appropriate age, we'll be able to cherish as a family. So I thank you for that. The other thing I'd like to share, just in light of everything that's been said, I've had kind of a rough few days. This weekend past marked the 1-year mark from when Brent got on a plane and left for what we thought would be a 365-day deployment. We're now, I think, on day 368 or something, and he's still not here. As I faced the date on the calendar and the weight that that date brought, it was probably even more difficult than the first few hours and days after finding out he had been killed, because the shock has started to wear off and the reality is starting to sink in. I desperately wanted to talk to Brent, to hear from him, to lean on the strength that he has when mine fails. And I discovered a treasure in a journal that he had kept as he left to Afghanistan the first time, which would have been his third deployment in the fall of 2011. And I'll share very briefly his own words that go right along with everything that has been spoken tonight, and especially a reminder and an acknowledgement that Brent and I and our children are very aware that we do not stand alone in this new role that we face as a Gold Star family. One of the greatest honors of my life is to have joined the ranks of those that have kept this country free for decades and centuries. So I'll read Brent's words. He's just leaving. He's on his way to his mobile station. He talks about how heart-wrenching it is to leave the kids and I, even though it's been several times. It doesn't get any easier. It's heart-wrenching every time I do it. So why do I go? This is my third tour in either Iraq or Afghanistan, and all three were voluntary. I go because of how I feel about our country. I go so I can hold my head up among my proud forebears who fought for our country. I go to do my part to keep my country and my family safe. I go to fill a critical position that was vacant and to honor the thousands of Americans who have given their lives in these wars. They will not have died in vain from my perspective. I go because I cannot stay when my country is at war. I would go even if I knew I would die. I am honor-bound to go and serve. Those words were the balm of Gilead to my broken heart, knowing that Brent, where he stands, has absolutely no regret and stands with nothing but humble honor to have given his life for this great country. I feel an incredible weight on my shoulders to help my children and the youth of our community and of this great nation to understand what the price of freedom is. It is a price no one necessarily wants to pay, but it's one that we are proud to have at least contributed to in some small way. So again, I thank the foundation that will help me help my children through such an immersive experience. I thank the 34th Special Operations Squadron for honoring our family with the flag that not only represents our country, but was flown over the country Brent died to help liberate. And again, I thank those of you that sit on this council and are the staff of this great city. There is no place I would rather call my home sweet home. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We certainly honor and love you and appreciate you, and thanks for being here this evening, and it's great to see you. appreciate your remarks as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next item on the agenda is public comments. We will also have public comments on item 9 at that appropriate time. So if you want to reserve your comments on that subject till then, that will be fine. So you'll have some information regarding that particular subject. So it's now open for public comments on any other issues. Please come forward and state your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North.
Who are you?
Who am I?
Just joking.
Just, just the one that bugs you weekly. It's my honor. As I was watching that presentation, it was very touching. I thought of a young man who last month saved his friend from a house fire. I happened to be their neighbors just down the street. And I would hope that the city would take a moment to recognize this young man who actually listened to a still small voice in his head and went in and actually made sure his friend made it out of the house okay. So I would hope that maybe we could take a moment to recognize him also, because that in of itself is an amazing thing. I believe he's 13 or 14. He's not very old. I do have some comments for number 9, so I'll leave those till later. But I did have a couple of things that I need some clarification tonight on the audit report. I was reading through the audit report, and I will tell you, it's a lot of numbers, a lot of columns, and a lot of understanding is still being learnt by me. I've got someone that's kind of helping me. But there are a couple of things that I would really like to have maybe some explanations on. And here they are. On page 10 of the audit, there's it's called the, I bet I don't have it with me. The long-term debt is what it is. It's on page 10. And I noticed that and I don't need you to answer these now. I just need you to maybe join the audit or something. They can be answered or at another date. I'm just putting these in your head. It says, we reissued the bond for the swimming pool in 2014 in the amount of $2,550,000. I would just like some clarification on where that money went, what it was used for. Did it go back into the pool, or was it used for something else? So just clarification on that. Also, some clarification on the developer that we owe $1,789,873 to. In the audit, it claims the City Water Funds has entered into 2 agreements with developers to construct improvements to the water system as part of developments of various areas in the city. These agreements have no required repayment terms by date and no interest, but rather require the developer to be reimbursed for the cost of these improvements from impact fees charged in the areas covered by the agreement. And then it tells you about the total. And it says that we did pay back $62,934 on that $1 million. I would like some clarification as to who those developers are and exactly what they are doing to be reimbursed for. That's the one thing I found in the audit is there's a lot of like developers, or there's no real clarification as to who it is. And I believe that we as citizens are entitled to know who we are paying money to and why. The other one was also an explanation on the money that we owe Harrisville City for water impact fees. I believe it's not a large amount, but it's $29,744. And we agreed to pay Harrisville City stormwater impact fee revenues associated with development that utilizes the Rice Creek Detention Basin. And so I was just looking for some clarification on what that is, why we're paying Harrisville City, why maybe a developer isn't, or the homeowners aren't. Those are just a couple of things, and then the other stuff I will just address when we do the detention basin. But those were some things that, as I went through the audit report, that kind of jumped out at me, and I just need clarification. So thank you.
Julie, could you email us to make sure we can get that to Evan so we can know exactly what your questions are?
Certainly.
I may have written them down wrong or something.
Yeah, certainly I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We do plan to honor that young man in February.
The 12th.
12th.
The fire department couldn't be here tonight. They're at a training, so, yeah.
Seeing no other comments, we'll proceed with the agenda. Discussion or action to consider accepting the audit report for fiscal year 2017-2018. Our presenter will be Kent Christensen, our city auditor. Kent?
Mr. Nelson is going to go through the financial statement part of this. Our part of the audit is basically to render an opinion on the financial statements, and we have done so. I'd like to have him present what the financial statements are, and then we'll come up and tell you what our opinion was based upon the information that he presents to you in these financial statements, and answer any questions that you have about the audit and the procedures that we did. But at this point, I'd just like to say thank you for allowing us to do the audit, engaging us for the audit for the year, and we just are very appreciative of the staff and all of the support and help they give. Audits are somewhat of a disruptive thing to the normal flow. In fact, a couple of you probably got, I know a couple of you got some questions thrown at you, 3 or 4 of you, in fact, of those of you that are here tonight. And so audits are a bit disruptive, and we appreciate the efforts that go in by staff, particularly those in the finance area, Evan, Jamie, Shelley, others that provide us with information. So, Evan.
Thank you for your services, Mr. Christensen. I call him Kent because he's my neighbor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. While it's fresh, I just wanted to respond to those questions because I think we can give some information that will be helpful. The reissued debt on the swimming pool in 2014, the city basically did a refinancing of that debt in order to take advantage of lower interest rates. So the previous debt was refunded and new debt was taken out at a lower rate in order to save the city money over the course of the bond. So that debt on the pool remains $1,791,000 at the end of fiscal year 18. Question number 2 is related to the water system improvements. The developer in this case was Randy Marriott, and he made some major investments in city infrastructure, some reservoirs, in order to facilitate development. So the infrastructure became assets of the city, but the city didn't pay for it up front. We made an agreement with the developer that over the course of time as development occurred, we would use impact fees, water impact fees, generated by development to pay for those improvements. So it's essentially an arrangement where the developer fronted the money for us without requiring us to without requiring us to borrow money privately or to pay interest. So we continue to pay off that loan amount with the impact fee revenues that we receive each year, just from development that is specific to those improvements. So we're continually, working down that debt that the city owes. Hopefully that helps.
Can I say one thing, Evan? So just for a graphical representation, the infrastructure was installed to serve this community here, but was oversized to kind of handle a much larger portion of the hill. And so it's that larger portion that, as other landowners buy into the system, they're paying us back, and then we pay him, essentially, just as Evan said. So, and some of those pieces have now actually been acquired by that developer. So he ends up selling the property to a homeowner who then pays him back, which is not unusual for developers to do. But it had to be installed for his original development, but we upsized it to handle the rest of the hill, essentially. So, and Matt and Dave are here too if you had other questions about that. Matt was involved in that whole discussion when it happened.
And the use of impact fee money is an appropriate use because it's paying for the infrastructure related to that development. The third question was related to the debt to Harrisville. This was an arrangement where a portion of our city, a small portion of our city, rather than discharging their stormwater into our own infrastructure, it made more sense for it to be discharged into Harrisville City's infrastructure. John has a map. So the city agreed to pay for a portion of the cost of that basin, and a similar arrangement where, as development occurs, the city would forward those impact fee, storm impact fee payments onto Harrisville City. So I don't have, I guess, the total balance. Oh, here it is. 29,744 is the outstanding balance. Any questions? Okay. And I'm happy to talk more if there are more questions from the public at a later time. Okay, so tonight we're presenting the financial statements for fiscal year 18. This is the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. A copy of this was included in the council packet on the website, and you should have received a hard copy as well. So we have a little presentation here to kind of walk through what this means and some of the highlights. So John, can you move to the next slide? The city is required to prepare financial statements that contain a lot of information about the financial operations and position of the city. The financial statement makeup is governed by state code, local policy, and generally accepted accounting principles, which are governed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So it's a highly regulated process that we go through, so that we can prepare and give you as well as the public an idea of where we stand financially. And then once our financial statements are prepared, we are required to undergo an audit of the statements. So we hire an auditor to review our information, and they render an opinion as to whether our statements fairly represent the financial activity of the city. The auditors also review our internal controls, the systems we have in place to protect against fraud or error, and then they also review how well we do with complying with legal obligations or regulations of the state or federal government. So that's a summary of the process that we go through each year. The next slide, this is just a summary of what's contained in the financial statement document. We have an auditor's report. There's a management discussion and analysis. This portion is prepared by staff as something of an interpretation of the statements. There's also the financial statements themselves, some additional notes and other information, and then additional reports from the auditor. I'll cover a few highlights from the financial statements. We have pasted in some of the pages into the presentation. The city net position at the end of the fiscal year was $81,208,438. This was an increase of $7.3 million. $72.4 million of that net position is investment in capital assets. So we don't have $81 million in the bank. Most of our assets are infrastructure. We do have $6.85 million in unrestricted cash at the end of the fiscal year. On the next slide, we're showing the governmental funds balance sheet. And I just wanted to highlight the fund balance in the various governmental funds. At the end of the fiscal year, the general fund had $1.6 million. The RDA fund had $995,000. The Aquatic Center Fund had $55,000. The Capital Projects Fund, $1.1 million. And Transportation Projects, that's a combination of our transportation funds, had $1.8 million in fund balance. The next slide, this is from the Statement of Revenue, Expenses, and Changes in Fund Net Position for the proprietary funds. And we were looking particularly at the enterprise funds, which are the utility funds. So the enterprise funds have a total net position of $39 million at the end of the fiscal year. That was an increase of $2.38 million. We had $2.4 million in unrestricted net position and $1.2 million in restricted dollars for impact fee use. The next page is a summary of our long-term debt. We've talked a little bit about the swimming pool debt, showing $1,791,000 for that. During the fiscal year, the city retired debt on some dump trucks that we had purchased. So those final payments have been made. We incurred debt with a new lease purchase agreement for the purchase of 2 new snowplow trucks. At the end of the fiscal year, we owed $188,616 on the snowplow trucks. Sorry, and then I didn't mention the system reimbursements that we talked about related to Marriott are also listed there. The ending balance is $1,789,000. Next, I wanted to highlight just a summary of general fund revenues. As you can see, the majority of our revenues come from taxes. I guess the next largest is intergovernmental revenue. That would come in this fiscal year primarily through the county with our road projects. The next.
And those taxes are not all property taxes. The majority of it's sales tax and other use taxes like the energy taxes and stuff.
The next slide is a summary of general fund expenditures. We spend about 40% on police and animal control, 24% on general government, and about 10% on parks, 10% on public works, and on down. So there's a visual representation of those expenditures. Just to highlight some economic factors, our sales tax revenues increased by 6.9% for fiscal year 2018. We just got a projection from the governor's economic report estimating I think it was a 6% increase in the coming year. So the trends are still looking positive, but no guarantees. Building permit revenues increased by 13.9%, which is our building activity and how that has been going. So those are positive trends for the fiscal year. The next slide, this is a graph that you typically see on our quarterly financial report. And so this is the final picture for the fiscal year. You can see a comparison of revenues to expenditures for the funds, and get some idea of how we landed at the end of the fiscal year. In every case, we were below budget or right at the budget on expenditures. In some cases, our revenues were higher than budget, which is a positive thing. In a few cases, our expenditures exceeded revenues. In those are cases where we expended some of our fund balance, and so that was part of our budget plan. So that's a summary of the funds. The next slide shows a summary of the general fund department expenditures, which almost all of our departments were under budget. Our government buildings department did go over budget right at the end of the year by about $2,200. As you know, at the end of the fiscal year, we try to look closely at that and propose budget amendments. And this was one that we didn't anticipate would need to be adjusted, but we had some major repairs at the senior center toward the end of the fiscal year that put us a little bit over budget. So we'll be watching that more carefully in the current fiscal year and make sure that we don't allow departments to go over budget.
Council, just so you know, that was the dishwasher over there broke. And it has to be a commercial grade dishwasher because for food handling licensing purposes, it has to heat it to like 165 degrees, the water. And a normal dishwasher only do to about 140, 145. So when it was fixed, and it was about $6,000. So
Just out of curiosity on that, they have a pretty healthy fund. How come they don't pay for that out of their fund?
under the agreement that the city has, we own and maintain the building, including all the stuff inside of it. So that's just, and it's been about 10 years since it was built, and they last about 10 years. So can plan for it again in about 10 to 12 years.
Put it on our depreciation budget.
Yep.
Thank you.
So those are the things I wanted to share as far as highlights from the statements. Do you have any questions so far about what we've talked about? Okay, well, I'd like to talk about the auditors gave us 3 recommendations. When the auditors review our work, if they find significant problems, they make a report to the state. In this case, these are some items that they are just recommending to us. It's not necessarily to the level of significant deficiencies or things that they would report to the state, but recommendations for us to improve our controls and our procedures. So the first recommendation is related to grant monitoring. We encourage the city to adopt procedures to monitor grant activity more closely, to request reimbursement for allowed expenditures on a more timely basis. Also, approved grants should be monitored so revenue is received and recorded in a timely manner. So we accept this recommendation. We agree with what the auditors are saying. We did have some grant reimbursements that were not requested in a timely manner, and we had a large accounts receivable amount at the end of the fiscal year. Those amounts have since been requested, and most of them have been received. I looked at the numbers today. We have about $54,000 that we're still waiting to receive from Weber County, but the requests have been submitted. In our city, we've historically had our grants administered in somewhat of a dispersed fashion, where departments would be mostly responsible for monitoring grants pertaining to their department. And so this has helped us to realize we need to change that, at least partly, to where the grants are more closely administered centrally, and allowing the departments to do their part and the finance department to do our part. So these are the changes that we are making. Grants are to be tracked centrally using spreadsheets shared between departments and the finance department. The finance department will be responsible for submitting for reimbursement on transportation grants through Weber County. Grant contracts and documents will be saved in a shared folder, and then outstanding reimbursement requests. I already mentioned that we've already submitted for those that are outstanding. So the department managers have talked about this recommendation, and we're all on board with making these changes, and we've started to make them. And so we'll be in better shape in the current fiscal year, and as we come toward the end of the current fiscal year.
And the one that we were behind on request was the COG transportation funding request for right-of-way preservation. And the reason we had just overloaded the person who was making those requests, and so we've assigned that to a new person in the finance department to handle those so that they're tracked easier, because the other employee was just overloaded. So, and it wasn't me, so.
Any questions on that? Okay, recommendation number 2. We feel the city should review its procedures surrounding the recording of accounts payable invoices to ensure that amounts for work completed on significant projects are included in the proper accounting period while waiting for required approvals. So this recommendation came as a result of an invoice that we received pertaining to this fiscal year, but the invoice didn't come till September or October. And so we had to make some adjustments to our accounts payable numbers at the end of the fiscal year. This was an issue where the project manager in Public Works was aware that there was work that needed to be invoiced and had contacted the vendor, but the vendor had delayed being able to generate an invoice. So we don't usually have this problem. Usually our vendors will invoice us within about 30 days. And in the cases where they aren't able to do it, the auditor recommended that we just make an estimate of what we think the value of that work was going to be and record an entry of our estimated number. So that's something that we could have done, but we didn't do. We didn't bring it up until we saw the invoice. So I think that's something that we can improve as we close out the fiscal year, to make sure that all projects have been invoiced, and those that have not been invoiced, that we make sure that we're aware of the amounts that we're expecting to be paying on those invoices. So, any questions on that one? The last recommendation is we suggest controls over journal entries be updated to include a second person review before they internal controls, and make it less likely for error and fraud. So we're happy to implement that. Any questions? So that's all for the recommendations. Overall, I feel like the city is in a really good financial position. We're in the finance department. We're looking forward to the budget process that's coming up, and we'll go into a lot more detail on different funds and different line items and priorities of the council. We would like to thank Kent and his firm for their work with us. They're very good at what they do, and they provide good support to us. They're really expert in the subject, and so they've helped us out a lot, and we appreciate working with them and the work that they've done for the city. If you don't have any more questions for me, I'll turn the time over to Kent so he can talk about the opinion that they've rendered and the report from the auditors.
Thank you, Evan, for that report. Andrew, good work, and Jamie and Shelley, and who have I left out?
Staff in general.
Staff in general, thank you.
Yeah, as Evan has gone through the financial statements briefly and touched upon some highlights to give you some information, He's presented some of the schedules directly from the audited financial statements. As I indicated at the beginning, our purpose as auditors is basically to take those financial statements and go through and do testing and review of systems and documentation and other things to for us to be able to form an opinion as to whether what is found in those financial statements fairly presents the information of the city for that particular period. We're happy to report that based upon the procedures we performed and the information gathered, the tests that we performed, we're able to issue what's called an unmodified opinion on those financial statements, which means that we believe and we've rendered our opinion that they are correct in all material respects. As part of the audit, as I indicated, we work with the finance department primarily, and again, we want to recognize them, Evan, Jamie, the staff there. We touch with others, Annette, Mr. Call, and others throughout the city, and we appreciate, we get our information back. We seldom have to ask twice, and that information comes to us, so we're appreciative of the timeliness that things happened, and hopefully we're not too disruptive as we go through this process. As part of the audit, we're also, as Evan indicated in his slide, we're also required to look at internal controls, and as we go through the internal control process, we're not really auditing the internal controls, but if we become aware of anything that appears to be a significant deficiency or something, then we report that and ask for correction and point that out. And if it becomes significant enough, then we have to expand our test procedures and other things in order to render this opinion. We had none of those significant items this year. We also are required to go through and do a series of tests for state compliance. We use an audit guide that's provided by the state auditor's office. Some years we have found some little things that require us to report a schedule of findings. We do that to some entities. This year we found, as we went through and audited those procedures that are listed in that letter, I think it's the last letter in your audit packet, we found no items of non-compliance that would require us to list those as findings. And as Evan indicated, we did make some recommendations which they have responded to. So again, we thank you for the opportunity to serve as auditors. If you have questions from me, I'd be happy to address them. As you can tell, you have a finance department that can answer your questions relating to the financial statements, but I'm willing to answer anything that I can.
So Kent, on a letter grade scale, we're talking A plus?
I can't give A pluses, but
okay. All right.
but you're in the in that A categories.
All right.
No, it does. The city does very well in terms of managing finances. You've, as indicated, you stay within your budgets, which is a significant thing. And incidentally, I meant to mention that is, as a council, you are an integral part of internal control within this city. What you do as a council is part of the internal control structure, particularly as you review the financial reports from our perspective. You review the financial information that comes to you at least quarterly. You look at those, you ask questions, and you track it down till you get answers that satisfy the questions. So Evan has done that on some items that came up as part of the audit, which he answered correctly from our perspective, and you're doing fine. Keep up the good work. We sometimes go places and we do audits, and when we leave, we're not sure we've got the full picture. We don't have that situation here with North Ogden City. Staff is good to work with, and we're just appreciative. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your services. Appreciate it. And thanks to our great finance department for handling the city funds. We appreciate it very much. I'm sorry I failed to recognize earlier that Cheryl Stoker got called out on an emergency situation with the family, and Ryan Barker's with some fireman training, but he will call in this evening at various points of our discussions. Okay. I need a motion then to accept the audit report.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Turner.
I second it.
It's been seconded by Councilman Severing. Begin the voting with Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Discussion and or action to consider the Fifth Amendment. Is that where you stand on the Fifth Amendment? To the agreement between North Ogden City and Village at Providence Point Phase 1 and 2 to reduce rear setbacks from 20 feet to 10 feet and clarify the setbacks on the lots abutting the reserve area for 300 East. This will be presented by John Call, our city administrator.
So, Council, Rob is out sick. Otherwise, he would have loved to be here. But this is what the council talked about a few weeks ago with the developer of the townhomes and the senior cottages. This is the actual language of the agreement as was shown in your packet. What they basically are doing is adopting these next two exhibits that I'm going to bring up, which are the actual, these will be the new documents inserted into the agreement that show, and there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to try and zoom in if it'll let me. But you can see that in this area, it's showing the 20-foot setback on the homes that are directly next to the Roy Lance Farm homes. And then as you get over into the other lots, which is 33, 34, and then 93 all the way down through 80, I don't remember, but it shows the 10-foot setback because there aren't homes that are directly abutting these. And the homes that are along the channel here, so there's a ditch that runs this way, are more than the 20 feet back here, even though technically they could be 10, but the Corps of Engineers won't let them go out into those ditches. And then the southern portion of the property, these are the ones that are going to be abutting the other senior assisted living center down here that are the 10 feet. The second item that was discussed by the council a few weeks ago was the setback for this cottage here, as well as this townhome in the distance between the finished surface should that road ever get put in 10 or so years. The idea being that it's 20 feet from the surface on either side. There again, it's a private road, and chances are that would never get put in. So it's just for right now going to be a kind of a park/open space for the residents of that community to enjoy. So do you have any questions about that? A representative from the developer or the builder, Visionary Homes, is here if you have questions for him. But essentially it's what the council talked about. The other thing that was a clarification in the staff report, the discussion was the garages will be set back the 20 feet from the curb, and then the homes are set back as well, or brought there. Right now this shows 9 feet from the back of the sidewalk. So any questions, council? Okay. Do you have any questions from the applicant?
Sounds like everything we discussed.
That was Rob's impression, is that this agreement technically meets what was discussed. This is the fifth amendment to the development agreement. So what we've done is every time the development agreement has been amended, we've increased the number, even though the council about a year and a month ago readopted the agreement in its entirety again. We kept it in numerical order just for clarity purposes, so that when someone's going through this in 10 years, they can hopefully keep it straight. So if there's no other questions, I think Annette has an agreement number.
A2-2019.
Questions or discussion? I would entertain a motion then regarding this.
I didn't hear it either.
What's that?
I didn't hear the agreement number. That's
A2-2019, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve Agreement A2-2019, approving the Fifth Amendment to the agreement between North Ogden City and Village at Prominence Point, as discussed several weeks ago and reiterated today.
Second.
We had a motion by Councilman Swanson regarding Agreement A2-2019, the Fifth Amendment to the agreement between North Ogden City and the Village at Prominent Point. I had a second by Councilman Turner. Begin the voting with Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Discussion and or action to consider an agreement between North Ogden City and Weber County concerning the library parking lot. Presenter will be John Call, our city administrator and attorney.
So council, this is the agreement. Back in October, we had sent the library an agreement. They have sent this one back, as well as they've actually signed this version. So if the council was to accept this, then we could get this version. I'll just show it. Well, maybe I'll try to show it to you. I believe it's the computers are fighting with me today. So those are the exhibits, but they've got if the council's willing to accept this, then it has been signed by the chair of the library board. But I'm going to bring up the one that shows the actual changes, because that's where the differences are between what the council approved and what they're suggesting. There's some clarifications they've added, like this one where the library can move the snow from their sidewalks onto our property. I guess just in case there was ever concern about that in the future, that it would be clear that they had the right. The other one, this slurry, we had in the original agreement said that we would put this slurry in. The library or the library's contractor did it as part of the construction. I had heard a rumor that it was done at the contractor's cost and not at the library's cost, but irregardless, it's been done. And I wasn't able to confirm with the contractor whether or not they had done that. I asked them and they never called me back. So there was, so that you can see that's the elimination of the slurry here of something the city would do. The biggest clarification seemed to be in exactly how the parking lots plowed and how that works. Dave is here tonight. He could probably talk to you about the plowing. We've probably pushed it 2 or 3 times, and the county pushed it 1 time or 2 times, and so it might be helpful for you to ask him what his impression of was. I believe it was his employees and not the parks employees who did the snow moving for the library. The other thing that, and there's some maps associated with this is where the snow should be pushed to and those sort of things. But the other thing they removed was we had put in here that if we eliminated the landscaping as part of the requirement, they would take it out of the parking lot. They took that out. They didn't give me a reason, but I think it's either they didn't want the expense of having to take it out, or they actually like having the landscaping there. And I don't know which it is. Then that's kind of the majority of the changes from what the council proposed. The significant things would be the parking, how the snow gets pushed. Specifically, these orange spots are where snow is going to be stored during a snow event, and it might be worth having Dave talk to you about how the snow pushing went, because I think that's the big issue is whether or not the city wants to be in charge of pushing snow, what the benefit is, what the cost of that is. One of the things that makes me the most concerned is in the agreement it says we shall not damage the curbs and gutters, and they'll eventually get damaged. It's just it will happen, and so under this agreement we would essentially bear the cost of repairing those. But anyways, and I didn't tell Dave I was going to ask him about pushing the snow, but I know that his guys have talked to him about it, and he's well prepared for stuff. So, Dave, maybe you could give us what your guys have said about pushing it.
So yeah, John is right. We've done it about half the time, and they've done it about half the time. With the layout of the new stalls, the biggest problem that our guys are seeing is that we used to be able to use big trucks. You know, it was one in, one out, and then another guy came in and came out. So I'll kind of go up to the screen and explain. But before, we were able to, all the parking was here, and so it was all pushes here. And we could even take some of the snow out into the road and remove, and then the big majority came here. With the stalls the way that they are here, these are both islands here, here and here, and then there's poles that are in the asphalt along here. So what we're having to do is we're pushing it, and then we're having big trucks have to come. So it's turning into a bigger project. I mean, because we're having pickup trucks pull it out, push it around, and then the big trucks are trying to remove it and force it all the way over here. And then usually Weber County still comes out after we're done and tries to do a little bit more cleanup than what we do, just depending on, because we try to hit this very first before any other cars are starting to park in here. That's our other big problem, is that one of the storms came in kind of midday, and there was cars parked here and here. Well, it makes it a lot harder to push snow into some of these places where it used to be that it used to just be one big push straight through, and we could put it to here, or like I said, take it out on the road and remove it. So those are some of the problems that we're running into. But like I said, it's been about 50-50. They've came and, if it's a storm during the day, they've been pretty good about getting there and getting it cleaned up. It's the ones in the middle of the night that we've been hitting them, before their guys are coming out. But we just try to hit them before there's any kind of cars in the parking lot is our biggest thing. So,
how much time is it taking them, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, before, like I said, it was one push in and out, so you were talking less than 10 minutes. Now you're probably a half hour to back drag that stuff, push it around the corner, and then have some of our bigger trucks push some of that snow. But I know Jesse's crew did it one time, and then our crew did it one other time. So, and then the other times have been just from Weber County. So. And maybe once we get a little bit better at it and we've done it more often, I mean, it's new and just different and a little bit more difficult. So
I appreciate what Dave's saying. I mean, I'm assuming that we didn't have the south lot before either, so that's a whole new animal.
Yeah.
My bigger concern is the damage to the curbs. If we're doing it 50% of the time, they're doing it 50% of the time. If they damage the curb, we still have to fix it. I don't like that. I think that's a burden that should be shared by both. I mean, if we damage the curb, then I understand that. I mean, but you're right, it will get damaged. So.
Especially the way we have to back drag it, and I mean, the way that the radius works there is just there's no way of not. Trying to get into the curb to try to get the snow out of there. So that's some of our biggest problems.
You hit that charging station, who's responsible for that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So, yeah, that would be my biggest concern would be the damage of the curb.
In A7, it under the county's responsibilities. It talks about the library shall perform all detail work in corners and around the islands and the parking lots. Is there a way for us to just kind of go down the middle? Away and stay. I mean, they're saying there that they're going to perform that detail work around the islands and in the corners. Is it possible for our guys to just stay, a foot away from those? I know it's hard to tell when it's, you got a lot of snow, but
yeah, absolutely.
I think instead of trying to do that detail work, one, I agree with Carl. I think there ought to be a shared responsibility for the repair of those things. But I think our guys ought not to be trying to do the detail work. If they're specifically saying they're going to do it, then let them do it. We'll do the major plow, and they can do the detailed work.
Okay. Which would actually probably work pretty good, because I think our big trucks would be able to take the majority of the snow out, and their pickup trucks would probably get some of that cleaning, the finish work done.
They did tell us that their preference would be that all the plowing be done by smaller trucks, by our Parks and Rec trucks or our cul-de-sac trucks, because one of the commissioners believes that the larger trucks have a better chance of damaging the asphalt. So, in fact, I thought there was something in this. Let's see. One ton or smaller vehicles. So technically, our larger trucks are not allowed on that parking lot under this agreement. And I believe our blue trucks would be probably a 2-ton.
They are a 2-ton.
So.
Which one is that, John?
It's B2. And it's B2A. City shall use 1-ton or smaller vehicles.
So back to the map, where's Weaver County property, library property at? It's a solid red line.
Yeah. So this is our property here.
We can use big trucks there and then stop. It's ridiculous. Well, I don't like the curb thing, and I think we should be able to use whatever truck we want to use in the main drive area, in the detailed area, or whatever we want to call it. You're not going to get a big truck up in there anyway. You'd have to use a pickup truck, but to drive through the main drive to use a bigger truck, I don't know why would that make a difference.
And all of our plows are on, they have the floating system, so I mean, they don't have that down pressure where it's causing damage to the asphalt. So
that's my opinion. I don't know how we change that, John, or what, or.
I can pass that. I mean, if at this point the council can either agree with it as is, we can send back some minor revisions, or we could say it's just not going to work out, and both of us will or plow our lots independently of each other, and it's just up to the council what you'd like to do. I think if we were to say we're going to just part ways, that we would find that the county would probably want they did incur some costs repairing a portion of our parking lot, and they would probably want some reimbursement, but I don't think it would be a lot of money.
I don't necessarily, I don't have a heartburn with us helping, I mean, it's our residents that use the library and stuff, so I don't have a problem with that. I just, my problem is, they said they take care of detail work, let them take care of detail work, we'll get it cleaned up so it's safe. Let our big trucks drive through the north lot, because they're not going to get in the south lot, and then share the cost on the curb and gutter damage. And then we ought to address the other poles that we could hit too somewhere in there. Just honestly, I don't know if we could word it somewhere where damage is. I mean, I don't know how you quantify who damages what though. But if damage is occurred by North Ogden City, we'll take care of it. But if it's occurred by the county, they will. But then there's going to be those that I didn't do it. So how does that work?
So if you can't tell who did it, then it's shared.
Yeah,
is that kind of the
To
language?
that effect, yeah. That would be, again, this is just one council member. I'll let them guys speak for how they want to speak. So,
You mean us?
yeah, you them guys.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
I like what Carl's saying, with the exception of, I think the repairs ought to just be shared, period. There's no way you can tell who damaged a curb and who didn't. It's not like we have special paint marker or anything like that on the plows, and we can go out there and do, some chemical analysis and, do some forensic thing and decide that it was their plow, not our plow, because we've got a different kind of paint or something along those lines. It ought to just be shared.
Okay.
Shared, yeah, but with the exception, I mean, these guys driving the plow, they'll know if they hit something, and a lot of times they'll know if they've damaged.
Doesn't mean they're going to report it, especially on the county side, if they know that we're paying for it.
So,
I mean, if they're not having to foot the bill, I don't,
well,
ownership makes you typically a little bit more responsible.
so I think the curb, I don't have a problem with curb and gutter, being shared costs, but I think any other features or whatever you want to call should be,
Whoever hit it.
whoever did it should do it, repair it, and if we don't know, it would be shared. That makes sense. I'm just going, one pole for them charging stations are about $1,000. That doesn't include the charging.
And you'll
boxes.
know if you damage the turret.
Exactly, and.
Or the light pole.
So you're talking, that's $1,000, and the charging stations themselves, if it's got two of them, they're about $1,000 each too, so. Only reason I know is because we just put some in, and that doesn't include any conduit or wire or anything. That's just the fixtures themselves. If they damage that, it could be a $3,000 bill that these drivers are going to know if they hit it.
Yeah, we'd know those ones.
And I would think that as soon as somebody walked on property, they'd know someone's hit that. So when Phil drives his Tesla down there to charge up.
I don't have a Tesla. Only thing I could do there is jump my heart.
So I don't know if we could and that's my thoughts. So what do you think, Dave?
I actually like that idea, actually. I like that if we clean the straightaways, I don't think there's very minimal damage from us. And then, let them do the cleanup work. But as far as, I see what you're saying, share the curb work, that's perfectly fine. But you're right, if we hit the charging stations, the light poles, anything inside those islands, we'll know, we would know that we did it, and that person can report it.
And I'll also see if they'll talk, if they can. I'll have Dave connect with them on what these trucks and how much pressure, and see if we can show that the smaller blue ones that we have are just fine to plow a small parking lot. So.
Yeah, because I would be willing to bet that some of our newer trucks like that have less down pressure than the pickups that don't have any kind of controls on their floats or anything. So.
They want to give a demonstration next snowfall. They can do my driveway. And just show
Okay. So I'll take those.
Good of you, Carl.
I'll take those 3 changes back to them, and I'll get it out to them this week so we can get a response. We've had some delays we've had some trouble getting them to respond after our last change went to them. So hopefully we can get it done before the winter's over. But until then, we're doing the best we can to move forward as if something's happening, so that they don't feel like we're just leaving them to the wind. So,
and I think we owe that to our residents anyway, at minimum to make the building approachable for county residents too.
Okay. Anything else you need me to add to that, Council? Okay.
Okay. We will just table that one until John gets other information back.
We hand that to Phil. So will you dial that one for Ryan?
Oh, yes. See if I can figure this thing out.
You got to hit 9 first.
Hello.
Hello, Ryan. It's your friendly council meeting.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We're going to put a microphone somewhat close.
Real
To
close?
somewhat
Okay.
close to the phone so the audience can hear you.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us, Councilman Barker.
Hey, no problem, Mayor.
Anything you say or can be used against you.
I'm going to turn your volume down a
Talk a
little.
lot then.
You're coming through loud and clear.
We wait for Councilman
Is
Turner.
that better?
We'll pause just a moment.
Waiting for you, Carl.
You can go ahead. I know about the pond.
Okay, item 9 is discussion or action to determine the design of the detention basin facility at approximately 100 West and 2500 North. Our presenter will be Jonathan Call, our administrator and attorney. Following his introduction, we would allow questions or discussion on this item from the group.
So, Council, the reason that we are talking about this again, as you may remember, sorry, I'm trying to get the pictures to turn around for me. So, when we last left this topic,
That's not up here.
right? Sorry. So when we last left this topic, we were looking at the different types of facilities that could go on here, and I believe the last motion that was made, the council asked that we explore those options. They had, as a council, you had moved away from the wading pond option, and then there was some talk in council meetings after that about possibly considering that again. And so with some of the delays with the holidays and other things that have gone on, we haven't come back with anything yet. And now the environmental engineer needs us to pick a final concept design so that they can include that in their environmental document to submit to the NCRS, which would complete the first phase of the grant approval, which was for the environmental process, but also put us in the pool for the next phase, which is the design and construction grant. And so we gave the council the three options, or these are the three options that were drawn up by Jones and Associates. The first one is just a grass facility. This would be similar to Wadman Park, Orton Park, those other parks where there's essentially soccer fields in detention basins. The second option is one where the irrigation pond, which would be the Pineview facility, is over on the west side of the park, and then there's a grass and landscaping portion. There's not a ton of detail about what would be in here because the environmental engineer doesn't need that, and that would come in the future discussions as we worked with the design engineer. And then the last option is the one that you've seen before, which is the irrigation pond with the waiting area, and then all of these are recreation facilities as well as detention facilities. Then two of the designs include an irrigation facility as well. We have Matt with Jones and Associates here who can answer questions, Dave Espinoza with Public Works, Tiffany's here with Parks, Ben Quick is here with Pineview Irrigation, and then did we end up with the environmental engineer here, Matt? No, so Matt is the only engineer in the room tonight. But anyways, so that's kind of an introduction that the direction we're headed. And I think it's, as the mayor, I think it was wise for him to move comments close to it so that we can get on point about the discussion. So anyways, unless you have any other questions of me, I think it would be good to move it over to the public. Yeah.
So tonight, we need to give direction on one of these three concepts, not necessarily designating one as a kayak pond or one as a wading pond as much as just which concept. I mean, obviously the wading pond, but which concept is best for the environmental guy, or do we need, because we don't have all the details on this other stuff.
So you won't be saying It will be a wading pond with this type of sand and this type of bowery and things like that, or it will be a soccer park or a lacrosse park. But essentially, we need to know, is it going to be predominantly grass or only grass? Is there going to be the irrigation component with grass, or is it going to be a primarily water-based facility, like the wading facility would be? And so those are the three concepts. And if we need to talk, if the council's leaning more towards one that includes water, then I think that it'd be helpful to have a discussion about where there's fencing and where there isn't fencing or things like that. An example might be, so I've talked with the landowner, the one, his only concern is that it looks nice. And so from my perspective, I'd probably recommend that we not, if there's water, that we make sure there's access to the area around the water so we can maintain it easily to keep the landscaping looking like one of our parks. And Tiffany can probably help provide some information on what she thinks works best. But the plan has always been to keep this a fully fenced, the whole perimeter of the park, unless we just went with a straight grass park, in which case there wouldn't be a reason for the fence except for on the north end to separate the horse property from the park.
Now, isn't if we went all grass, wouldn't that eliminate the Pine View element?
It would, and I think Ben's done a lot more federal grants than I have, and Ben and Matt have been in contact with the state about the process. But in theory, if my impression, and Ben can correct me when he gets up, but is that if we eliminated the irrigation component, then Pineview wouldn't be involved in the process, and we potentially lose the grant because they're the primary sponsor and we're just a co-sponsor. But I think Matt and Ben could walk you through that a little better than I can, and in better words, more eloquently.
I want to show that spreadsheet. Is this?
Oh, so we did have, and this is assuming the federal grant fell through because we lost the irrigation component. The big thing to focus on here is the cost to the city. This cost analysis doesn't take into account the sale of any property or any property tax or sales tax increases. It's just what the facility costs, and it's based on a simple cost estimate that Matt did for us, and it shows essentially if under the grant process, or under the grant application, it would cost the city about $2.7 million to build the facility, which would include irrigation, park, and stormwater. And then if it was just a grass-only park, the rough estimate is it'd be about $4.5 million. And there again, when we sold the old basin, we'd get some of that money back, and then we would recoup approximately, based on our current average, about $200,000, give or take, in sales tax revenue. But that wouldn't immediately, that sales tax revenue wouldn't just turn on tomorrow. It would come as the property built out. So it could take a little while to get that payback as well, which is going to happen under either scenario, because that property won't be built on tomorrow. So,
well, one other question: we have not acquired the property.
No.
And I thought part of the condition on acquiring the property is the owner needed some water rights or some water extension or something.
The owner needs access to irrigation. Currently on that property is where there's some ditches that turn out into a pond on his property, and he pumps out of that pond to irrigate his roughly 40 acres. Currently about 15 of it is already coming in for development. That's going to be annexed in and then brought to the council, I think, for a development proposal. But he'll still have roughly 20 acres left over that will continue to need to be irrigated, and so that would need to be something that's worked out, is how that landowner would get the irrigation.
So if we went with the all grass one, has the owner indicated that he wouldn't sell the property at that, or not?
No, he hasn't. Every indication is that he said he will work with the city to sell us what we need, and as long as it looks nicely landscaped, he's not gonna say it has to be this or it has to be that.
Okay.
The only thing essentially the two things he's he wants is it's landscaped like a park would be landscaped, and that there be at the minimum a black dip vinyl fence between his property and the park. So those are the two things.
The only questions I have yet.
Okay.
I reserve the right.
That was the question I had, was whether or not the grant would still be in play if we eliminate the irrigation piece.
And I really think it'd be good to hear from Matt and Ben.
I'd like to hear from Matt and Ben.
And I think it might be, however the council would like to do it, whether you want to do public comments up front or just have everyone comment at the same time, it's up to you. Or you can call anyone up now and then have public comments and what,
I think we ought to have Matt and Ben talk, and they may answer some questions out there.
Okay.
I think it'd be a good idea to get all the facts out and then allow the public comments.
Yep.
Okay.
Paper, rock, scissors.
Alphabetical. Yeah, be both up there at the same time.
Yeah, it'd be an honor. Hello, Mayor, City Council, John. When this grant was written, it was actually it was done in one afternoon. We got late notice of it. Myself, Matt Harvingston, and Greg Siegmiller sat down and we put a proposal together that caught the eye of the NRCS. And that project that was proposed had three elements. We were essentially using one piece of property to serve three purposes. The first purpose was secondary irrigation water. The second purpose was storm water detention. And the third purpose was community recreation. So to answer a previous question, if you eliminated the irrigation component of it, not exactly sure, but Weber Box Elder Conservation District, one of the entities of Pineview Water Systems, is the sponsor. North Ogden City is the co-sponsor. If we're kicked out of it, then I'm pretty sure that grant goes away. You can apply for a new one, but it's that much less appealing because it's a project that serves fewer purposes. From my perspective, I feel like it is a good use of property. Weber Box Elder Conservation District needs to grow with the population and the amount of people that it serves. We need this reservoir and to keep serving the growing population. What makes this especially enticing is the location. According to water models that were done in the past that I actually built many years ago, it is in the location, right near the location where the ideal location was Corky Sod Farm, and this is right in that area. It serves the same general purpose. And yeah, I'd just like to stress that to serve three purposes with one piece of property just seems like the perfect cooperation, interlocal cooperation to maximize efficiency and to use our funds cooperatively to come out with an efficient project that works best for all.
So can it be irrigation pond, grass, and detention basin qualify for that?
Yes,
that grant?
yes. And one thing I've got to, let me answer your question first. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a wading pool. It just needs to have recreation. I mean, that was the third element in the proposal that we gave to the NRCS. And
so we put a swing on it, huh?
yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I'm sure the city council will decide what is best for the residents. But as far as needing to decide today, that's not necessarily required because the environmental assessment was already sent to the NRCS, and I just found this out today, just left the recreational component very vague. Just stressed the fact that there would be a form of recreation in the area that would hold detention water during a storm event. So as far as needing to decide whether you want a wading pool or if you want a soccer field or what have you, that doesn't necessarily need to be decided, especially because I guess there could be an iteration